Welcome back to the Intentional Leaders Podcast. I am Cindy Wetland, and I am the host of this particular episode where we are going to interview Dr. Sharon Spano. She is a strategist, an author, and a thought leader in the areas of integrating leadership, wisdom, and human development. Did you know that as adults, we can continue to evolve, develop, and transform throughout our lives? Yet many of us don't consider what does that mean and how to do it. So Dr. Sharon is going to share what it means to grow through leadership, not just in it, and how your relationship with yourself and also with time can either drain you or empower you. So let's talk about your purpose and the sacredness of work and how that may be an important shift for you to take right now. Let's dive into this really thought-provoking conversation. So today I am delighted to welcome Sharon to this podcast episode. Thank you for taking time to be here today.
Oh, I'm just
Appreciate
so
it.
excited, Cindy, and thank you so much for I'm so impressed with the work that you're doing, and it's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you for that. And likewise, of course, we met previously and I got to stalk you and all the work that you're doing, the amazing, incredible work that you're doing. And I'm really excited to share that with the audience today, how you think about leadership and how you think about work and purpose in life. So before I dive into those questions, when you and I spoke, you told me a little bit about your journey to get where you are today with your philosophy and strategies on leadership. So, just share with the audience a little bit about the journey to how you got to today, and then we'll look at what are some of the principles and practices that you share with leaders.
Oh, that's such a great question because it wasn't a path that I set out to, really be on. I think that often happens for us. If you listen to the universe, you kind of take the
Yes.
cues as to where you should go. And I started out in the early years doing advocacy work because I had a son, as you well know, that was born with a very rare metabolic disorder. And
Yeah.
from that evolved this speaking career that I also didn't realize I had a talent for, but as I was advocating around the country on behalf of persons with disability, I became very much aware of systems and how they work. And that, the short story is that morphed into doing more and more corporate consulting work and
Yeah.
speaking around the country. And one of the things that I noticed very early on, I mean, literally by, 10 in the morning, I'd have several people at my desk, often in tears, talking about something they had gone through with a boss or someone in a managerial position. And as you know, at that point, I was pretty much in 150 cities a year. You
Yeah.
start to see these themes, and I became very passionate about leadership. And so I started
Yeah.
doing leadership development in and out of corporate and just really became very much committed to helping people be better leaders. And of
Yeah.
course, my doctorate work, my dissertation, as you well know, is at the intersection of leadership, human development. And really explored how leaders at certain stages of human development, which I know we're going to talk about,
Yeah.
experienced wisdom, because not
Yeah.
all leaders, have the opportunity to be trained to be more effective leaders. Often, as you know, they maybe climb up a corporate ladder, and sometimes the training's there, sometimes it isn't. And
Yes.
that's where I started to see the gaps.
Yeah. Well, isn't it wonderful though that life brought you to this place today? And I think those small little pieces of opportunity or, noticing problems or challenges that people are having where you can fill a need, a bigger need even than what you were filling, which was very significant for you, for your family, for your son, and then to think even more broadly, like how do I help people on a broader scale? I think that's really amazing and wonderful.
Yeah, it was just and still is. I mean, I feel
Yeah.
very privileged to do the work that I do and work with
Yeah.
leaders at high levels and help them. Basically what I do now is really help them discover what might be holding them back so that they
Yeah.
can be better leaders for themselves, their businesses, and their families. Because even the very highest achiever I find they're often hitting a wall, what I often call the emptiness of success. And they have
Yeah.
the business going and they have, maybe all the toys, the house, the cars, but then they hit a wall and something's missing. And I really love helping them uncover what that is. And then we do that deeper work. So again, they can be more effective in their lives.
Yeah, which is a beautiful journey and a beautiful journey to take people on that aren't even aware maybe they've hit that
Right.
wall.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of, I have all the trappings of success. Why don't I feel better or more successful? I
Right.
think is a great opportunity to explore that for each of us. So you, and I know you do talk about uncovering the importance of uncovering purpose. And you mentioned to me earlier, and I love the way you framed it. You said we're all wired and gifted in living our purpose, and yet a lot of people don't.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think of that gift of our purpose and exploring it, what does that look like in terms of leaders that you've worked with? And what is the biggest barrier that you see to
Well,
uncovering
it's
that?
such a great question, Cindy, because what I'm finding through the years is that high achievers often, and this was quite a surprise to me, are often motivated by some form of trauma in their background. And
Mm,
and when I say trauma, it's often, it's all dependent on the individual, capital T, lowercase t. But often there's something that has happened in their background, and they're inspired to achieve, maybe because their parents worked really hard to immigrate to the United States and they feel like they have to fulfill their parents' dreams. I mean, there's a whole host of things
mm,
that occur. And so when we start to, get into some of that, my work is all trauma informed, then we can kind of, get to the root of why you don't have a sense of fulfillment. And
yeah,
another thing that was always surprising to me was how many people fall into doing something based on what other people think they should be doing. You know, my father was an engineer, or my father had a law firm, or whatever. And then they find, even if they're successful in it, again, that missing hole within it. So even if they're in a business that they love and they built it, to great success, the purpose part is, to me, really, really important to define. Because
yeah,
again, if they've hit that wall, then they start to realize, well, it's not just about the money and, building the company. There's something deeper that I want. And,
yeah,
I'm a big believer in personal mission statements. That goes back to the early Covey days, and I was one that resisted them forever, and I thought they were silly and, just another gimmick. But depending on the client, I will take them through a process where they define that. And what most of
yeah.
my clients really love is, it's a long process, and I won't go into all that, but most of them, I'm finding, want to be seen, and they'll say that. I never felt so seen as through this work. But it's not only that I see them, it's that they learn to see themselves for who they truly are.
That's so profound. And isn't that ironic though? That I mean, how do we not see ourselves? And yet, I mean, all the research on self-awareness is that we believe we're more self-aware than we actually are. And
Hmm.
I think about those disconnects a lot, and a lot of I think people believe like, oh, okay, I'm not self-aware of all the development I have or all the things I'm not doing. But to your point, I think sometimes people aren't aware of the gifts that they have and the things that they are doing too. It's not just like those things that I need to work on that I'm oblivious to, but it is what am I really wired to do well? What gifts do I have? And do I know what those are? Am I
Yeah.
able to talk about it?
So important. And I
Yeah.
think that's where people like you and I come in, because we see
Yeah.
them. And
Yeah.
I just feel like I'm a mirror, I'm holding
Yeah.
up, because I'm trained to see them. And
Yeah.
so, excuse me, you help them see them for themselves.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And what a glorious mirror to hold up. You know, when you get to be the mirror of all the beautiful things that someone has or does or has accomplished or their purpose. I think that's really a wonderful mirror to be. It's a magical one, unlike some of the ones in Harry Potter, which, you know, there was a dark side there.
Well,
So,
and a lot of times people, they have awareness of their faults or their deficits, or what psychologists often call the shadow side, but they
yeah,
don't understand how those things came to be about as a
yeah,
part of them. And even
Yeah.
if they do, they don't understand how to move beyond them and use those shadow sides in more powerful ways. So that's a little bit of the harder work on my end is, when
Yes,
you're
of
holding up
course.
the mirror, it's always glorious, as you said, to show them, the greater attributes, but then you also have to share the truth of, what's holding them back. And that's a
Yeah.
delicate matter, but I find the process, that I take people through, as I'm sure you do, we can do that with trained and delicate expertise so that people can receive it with grace and love, and
Mm.
not be shamed or feel shamed by
Yes.
the work.
Yeah. Yeah. You create that safety net for people to explore it, understand it, be
Yeah.
honest, and that it's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that about what you're doing. And when you think about people taking that pause to do that work, what typically prompts the people that you work with? Like if I'm envisioning people listening to this episode and thinking, is that me? Oh, am I stuck? Am I, do I need this kind of exploration? How does one go about knowing that they need this work to be done?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, but let me preface it with kind of the depth of the work, if I could, in a
Yes,
short and
please.
succinct way, is, that I am very much about this 12 stages of human development. To me, that
Yes,
was a
do
game
that.
changer in my own life, because when I was
Yeah.
doing leadership development across corporate, one of the things that I was always perplexed by is, let's say I was working with an executive team or middle management team, and maybe you had 30 people going through the process, and 29 would just have transformational growth, like unbelievably so, and then there'd be one that was stuck and just couldn't get it.
Yeah.
Well, when I got into the human development work and realized there are 12 stages of human development, and we say roughly 62% of the American workforce is at stage 5 or 6. One
Okay.
stage isn't better than the other, but it does give you a richer experience of life as you move into what we call the later stages. So to answer your question then, if I'm someone in the workforce and so let's say at what we call more commonly the achiever stage, which is where
Yeah.
most of your entrepreneurs and business people are, I'm really in this mode of goal setting, goal setting, goal setting. I'm chasing time and money, and all of that. But what happens then when we do hit perhaps that wall, or we start to feel like, I'm not as fulfilled as I thought I was going to be when I, grew the company to this piece or
Yeah.
whatever, is often, and this is what's so exciting, Cindy, is people don't realize that they're actually feeling that sense of unfulfillment because they're leaning into quite possibly another stage of development.
Mm.
It's the
Okay.
easiest way to think about it is what we used to call in the old days, like it could feel like a midlife crisis,
Oh,
because
sure.
there's an identity shift of
Yeah.
what I wanted or thought I wanted, and who I thought I was no longer is fulfilling. So then who am I if I'm not the
Yeah.
CEO, or I'm not the head of whatever? And
Yeah.
that is why I'm so passionate about the work, because when
Yeah.
you can help people see that they're actually leaning into a richer, more robust experience of life, and you can create the path for them to get there, and then I actually see them start to get there, it's just so rewarding for me and for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there's kind of irony there that it takes that discomfort to go into and leaning into that discomfort to say, what do I do? And I don't fix it with external things. Let's move, let's go on a vacation, let's buy a car, let's do all these things. Let's rather look inward and decide where to go next, that the discomfort is coming from who we are, not what we have. And that's a whole different experience to walk into, but awkward. So yeah, I know you do some wonderful work around human development theory. And for those that are new to that idea or aren't understanding what it is, how would you describe that? And how would you describe it relative to what we traditionally think of as leadership development?
Oh, that's such a great question. When I did the research, one of the things that surprised me was that leaders who I thought, in my own mind, just from interviewing them, would be later stage, actually showed up to be earlier stage.
Mm.
And so the easiest way to think about it is we break the stages down into tiers of four. So the
Okay.
first four, everybody's familiar with because that's birth to roughly adolescence. Even though
Yeah.
we say it's not, none of it correlates to age per se, because you could have people in their 50s that are very early stage as well. And that when that
Yes.
happens, that is often due to some form of trauma, being brought up in environments where you're not safe. Our
Yeah.
prisons, to be honest, are full of people who are very early stage. They
Yeah.
just didn't get the opportunity. They didn't have the resources to develop higher levels of consciousness or ways of thinking. So the first we say are very concrete. For a child, water is wet,
Mhm.
and that's that. And then as you move into the next four, we start to develop different levels and different ways of thinking. And those are often more abstract ways of thinking. When you
Sure.
get into the later stages, the motivation changes entirely, where I'm not as driven to achieve or by goals, but more interested in humanity.
Mm.
How can I serve the greater good? My
Yeah.
my money is spent differently. As you know, I wrote a book on the pursuit of
Yeah.
time and money, and I looked at that in the context of how do the different stages experience time and money because they experience it very differently because the
Yeah.
motivation is different. So,
Yeah.
like in the earlier stages, it's instant gratification. I have no sense of time. I told my parents I'd be
Hmm.
home at 10. I'm saving for a car. Now I just blew it all at the local movie theater on the girl that, whatever. Or
Right.
the latest brand of jeans. It's instant gratification. And then, as I said, when you move into the next four, it's more about goal orientation and acquisition. And then later, I don't even care about money as much. But
Yeah.
if I do, I'm maybe more philanthropic or interested in
Yeah.
world hunger, how to save the planet, things of that nature. And it's not
Yeah.
that people in the earlier stages don't care about those things. They may still participate in those things, but they're also more interested, let's say, in the goal achievement and more concrete opportunities to use their time and money in ways like that.
Yeah. So when and I do and I haven't read it yet, but it's right here. So your book, like right on my pile. I was
Good,
like,
thank
I
you.
gotta read this. This is, and we're going on vacation next week, so I'm taking it along.
I
Um,
don't know if it's a good vacation read, but
it
but it's
is,
it's
trust me.
interesting. Well, people like you and I, we're geeks, right? So we read those
Oh,
kind of books on vacation. Yeah,
I know.
yeah,
My mom's telling me, read fluffy books, and I'm like, oh, The Pursuit of Time and Money. Yes,
yeah,
please.
yeah,
This is Sharon's book. So I think so. One perspective is the time and money aspect of development. How do you see, again, we look at a professional environment and a leader being a little stuck. What does that stuckness look like as a leader within an organization? How would
yeah,
they, again, how do they kind of know that they're stuck? And you
yeah.
mentioned this, I'm not fulfilled with what's around me. Where are they, where do you see that they need to get to? And is that the
Yeah.
purpose? Like,
Well, what we say about, because we want to be careful when we talk about the stages that we're not making people feel like,
or
oh,
less?
if you're an earlier stage, you're not a good
Yes.
person. We're
Yes,
not saying that.
absolutely.
Um, Achievers
Absolutely.
typically, that's their big question is how do I get to a later stage? Because
Right.
they're achievers, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Irony. Irony.
with respect to leadership, let me just give you a couple examples of how you'll see it play out. So
Okay.
at the expert stage, which is often, even though it's not directly correlated to industries, but that's where we'll often see financial advisors, attorneys, engineers. I mean, they are experts in their field. And
Yeah.
so if they're in a leadership role, and again, I'm being a little stereotypical here, but where you
Yeah.
might see some stuckness is if they land, when I wrote the book, we did some work around looking at the spectrum between scarcity and abundance. And
Yes.
so what was interesting was the moderate scarcity and the moderate abundance because they looked very similar in terms of the actions that the leaders took. The difference was moderate scarcity, decisions were made based on fear.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I might be afraid, for instance, to think about expansion of my business when COVID hits.
Yes.
Where someone at moderate abundance would say, oh, this is opportunity, because when this blows
Yeah.
over, I need to be positioned to pivot and take off. So that's kind of a nuanced example there.
Yeah. Agree.
There's a fear-based decision-making component when you're in the earlier stages that often isn't present. And again, those nuances are played out even more if you're in a corporate environment versus an entrepreneurial environment. Because entrepreneurs naturally, they're just going to get out there and pivot and do what they need to do for the most part.
Yeah.
But they're often again at that achiever stage, which is one
Yeah.
above the expert stage. With
Yep.
respect to time, one of the things that I've seen there, and I'll go back to the example of like an engineer. They often are so focused on being efficient,
Yes.
they won't be as effective. So I've got
Yeah.
two partners right now that are on in the, one is an expert, almost, a brilliant strategist, and, wants to count every penny and make sure they make every decision. But then he can't make decisions because he's
Yeah.
overthinking it. The other
Yep.
guy is more of an entrepreneurial visionary. Let's just go forward. We'll figure it out along the way. If we need to create more money, we will. So, they have to understand those differences because they both bring valuable aspects of who they are to the table. But sometimes it can get a little muddy because, one doesn't understand why the other one is slower to make decisions. And the other
Yeah.
one thinks the other's flying by the seat of his pants,
Right.
that kind of thing. Does
Yeah.
that answer your question to give you an
Yeah.
example?
Yeah, it's a great example. And it also is so interesting because you're comparing and contrasting like two people or two different perspectives. And I think a lot of times what we do is we judge each other rather than reflecting on why are we different? What is below the surface that is creating those differences in how we're decisioning and how we're moving forward and what we believe our goals should be or could be. And in the absence of curiosity or compassion or reflection, then we judge and think, well, that,
Right,
that other
right,
person, right? Like, what did they? And your whole concept, and I do love the concept both with time and with money combined. Again, I'm excited to read. But when you talk about scarcity to abundance, just in general, there's probably a lot of people who don't understand that concept. How would you, how would you describe what that looks like? Because you're talking about
yeah, yeah.
scarcity is fear. I'm holding back. What does an abundance mindset look like, and how would that show up?
Yeah, at first let me say that I decided to look at time and money together because, well, obviously there's a lot of books out there about time and money. But
Yeah.
what I began to realize in working with leaders was they either had a lot of time and no money, because
Mm,
they didn't have the work, so
yeah.
they had all this time but no money, or they had a lot of money and no time because they were working so much. And I
Yeah.
began to see that these two resources, I mean, if we think about
Mhm.
it, throughout our entire day, we are making decisions, often, even at a subconscious level. Do I have enough time and money to do this or go in that direction, expand my team, take on a new
Mhm.
product, whatever it is. So then back to your question, I feel like, well, scarcity showed up literally as total fear. The things
Mm.
people would say is, I never have enough money. I never have enough time. I'm never going, they feel hopeless and trapped. I'm
Yeah.
never going to be able to have the life I thought.
Yeah.
They have no sense of control over their own lives. And I would say that's probably a big part of our American population for people that are
Yeah.
in the workforce and not in leadership or business positions is they feel stuck. If you're
Yeah.
flipping hamburgers somewhere and you don't see a future for yourself and you don't have the education or the opportunity or the resources, it's natural that you would feel afraid, particularly with the ups and downs in our economy and the uncertainty in our world.
You bet.
Most of these things, though, these premises come from our early childhood narratives. So, like one of the questions we asked is, what did you learn about time from your parents? What did you
Ooh.
learn about money from your mother or father? And
Yeah.
most people can tell you right off. We were
Yes.
always late. My mother was always pushing us. because she never thought, we should be late, or, it was pressure in some
Yes.
form. And then to
Yes.
the moderate, as I've said, moderate, they may be doing the right things, but with a fear undertone, fear-based undertone. So the
Yeah.
example I like to use, Cindy, is I interviewed a man who actually lived in the Orlando area, and he was saving for retirement. Like, that's a very responsible thing to do.
Yes.
That's one of the things we looked at that I talk about in the book is our sense of responsibility. But he had probably 30 years more, 30 years plus before retirement, but he wouldn't take his kids on vacation or even to Disney because he's saving for retirement.
Yes.
So that
Interesting.
those, so now I'm not living my life, right?
Uh,
Because I'm in fear all the time that there isn't enough. Now I'm
yeah.
doing responsible things, where in a scarcity thing, I probably don't have the resources to even save for retirement or think
Yeah.
that far out. Because the other thing that is interesting with respect to time is in the early stages, people literally can't see beyond 2 years.
Mhm.
They're not looking at 10 or 15 years out. So, and then when you look at the moderate abundance, uh, again, we're doing the responsible things, but we're not afraid.
Mhm.
And then abundance is the other extreme. My husband lives in abundance. No fear.
Oh,
Whatever the economy is doing, he just gets out and creates. He never
yeah.
worries about the ups and downs. And we've been through many recessions, like most of us, and we've had our highs and lows. He just dusts himself off and gets out and creates. So the abundant mind always feels a sense of confidence and control that I can create that which I need for me, my family, my team, whatever. It doesn't mean it always goes perfectly,
Yeah, of
but
course.
for instance, with my husband, if he's a land developer, so if he comes home and says, I'm looking at XYZ pieces of property and this, and if I say, well, what's your plan B? He goes, what do you mean?
Right.
Because he doesn't have a
Don't be
plan
silly,
B.
Sharon. Of
Because
course he
he
doesn't.
knows plan A is going to work. But if
Yeah.
it doesn't, he pivots so fast that plan B feels like plan A to him. Because
Oh,
what he doesn't realize is that when he's going after whatever he's going after, he's already building contingencies. And
okay.
yeah, because he just does it like seamlessly in a way that it doesn't look like a stop and start. And there's not much,
Yeah.
and I very rarely see him disappointed if a deal falls through. He'll just go, oh, well, I wasn't supposed to have that one. I'll go look at the next one.
Yeah.
I don't have that because
Right. He's
I
like, I
come from
don't
a
need
poverty family.
it.
I brought up where there wasn't literally enough food. And
Yeah.
so I'm one that, while I have the entrepreneurial spirit of I can create, there's also another part of me that's always worried, well, what if it doesn't work out? And
Yeah.
so that's kind of a battle and something we kind of laugh about between us. Does that give you a sense, an example?
Absolutely. It's a beautiful example. And it's a beautiful example too of um I that abundance mindset. To me, I'm moving towards it, I would say. And I too grew up, we didn't have a lot of money growing up and it was
Yeah.
all those things, right? So I see scarcity in my whole family showing up in different ways.
Hmm.
And when it comes to that abundance mindset, what it really looks like and feels like and sounds like if you could bottle that, how
Yeah.
joyous would that be?
Right.
I'm sure there's some challenges with that,
Yeah.
but from his perspective, there isn't because he has, as you said, that confidence, that control, that it's all going to be fine. And if it isn't fine, I'll go over here and it'll be fine. I just, I,
Yeah.
I admire that so much, and I aspire to more of
Yeah.
that, right? To
Yeah.
getting to more of that. I think that's
Yeah.
a very joyous way to live,
I
I
think
would
it
think.
is, and we've had some real setbacks in our lives. We had
Yeah.
his company at one point was a joint venture company, and someone embezzled every, and we
Oh,
really like lost everything back in
yeah.
the day. And again, he looks at it. It didn't give him. Um, there was none of the why didn't I see this coming? And I was
Mhm.
not a good leader. I was not a good. It was like, okay, and this is crucial to development. If we ask ourselves, what did I learn from this? Because how we make meaning from something is what allows us to develop further, rather
Yeah.
than sit in the negative, aspects of, oh my gosh, I failed and I should have seen, or, all the shoulds, all
Yeah.
that stuff. We can make meaning from it. And that takes skill and talent to
Yeah.
learn how to ask those questions and then really reflect. And that's when I think, again, if people have had a significant setback, they need someone to walk alongside of them to help them see, the opportunity in even, that loss or that, perceived failure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what is challenging about that from an outside view is the reframing, the asking of the questions, the stepping back to say, what do I learn? I think some people perceive, oh, you're just trying to, be too optimistic. Oh, you're just
Right,
trying to sugarcoat it. You're just
right,
trying to do this. And I think some people perceive that experience of going through it, reflecting on it, and as you said, making meaning of it somehow feels like it's, I don't even know the word to use, not superficial or that um, it's not going to matter, that it doesn't matter because they're so entrenched in
yeah,
what they believe the meaning of that thing is.
yeah, yeah. And I always say, because I think there's a grieving period when we have a loss or, again, a
Yeah.
perceived failure. So it's sort of like, you feel what you feel and you should allow
Yeah.
yourself to experience those feelings. But
Yeah.
then you just don't want to stay stuck too long and dwell on that. Because
Yeah.
if we don't make meaning from what happens, there's a very good chance we're going to repeat the same scenario.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we don't want to, it's sort of like, the old joke, the guy that, had the horrific marriage and then he keeps marrying the same type of woman
Yes.
over and over again. It's like, okay, it didn't work the first time and yet you're doing it again and again. And but he can't see it's the same type of woman. He thinks it's a
Yeah.
new experience because he didn't do the work to figure out what
Yeah.
happened in the first marriage.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
maybe not the best example, but I see
It,
that a lot in leadership as well. You keep hiring the
yeah.
same people.
Yes.
You keep attracting the same partners or the same vice
Yeah.
presidents or whatever. And it's like, I'm looking for people maybe just like me when I really need a more diverse team to see the things that I'm not good at or that I don't see.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a great way of describing it and a great way of again, from the outside looking in, what needs to shift and evolve in that human growth and development. My way of framing things needs to
Right,
evolve. It needs to get more sophisticated. I need to be more introspective in a way that's constructive and helpful and helps me go forward
right.
and eliminate some of those challenges that maybe I'm in a pattern of staying stuck in.
And
So,
without beating
described
yourself
it
up,
well.
because there's a
Yes.
point in that. I always tell my
Right.
my my clients, like, you can call it whatever you want. Yeah, I call it my nerdiness. So when
Mm.
it comes up again, like, for whatever reason, I'm dealing with quite a few people right now that are struggling with comparison you know
Oh.
and I think it's something that achievers struggle with. And I was telling a client the other day, because I'm a relatively new golfer, I'm learning the game and it's a hard game, and it's easy for me to go out on the course and start comparing myself to my other women that I'm playing with. But
Yeah.
there's no point in that, because all it does is take the energy away and the focus away from my own game. So, there's two ways to look at it. I could use it to catapult me, to be better, which is what I
Mhm.
try to do. But then when I find myself, if someone, for instance, that started when I did is now doing better than me, and I fall into that trap, I'll just, oh, my nerdiness showed up again.
Yeah.
That's the lower or earlier stage Sharon, the achiever Sharon,
Yeah.
the competitive Sharon, and you're not serving me right now. So step aside.
Yes.
Let me go to my higher self and just hit the darn ball as best I can.
I love that. And self-talk is important. I mean, that's how it
Yeah.
shows up, right? To us
Yeah.
is that self-talk. What are all the voices in our head? And are you
Right.
even paying attention to what you're saying to yourself and the effect of that? So
Right.
I love that.
Right.
I love that you're consciously labeling it
Yeah.
and telling yourself, like, move on. Hello.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go this
Yeah.
direction.
It's very
Yeah.
helpful. I mean, whatever works, whatever techniques we need to bring us to our highest potential. there, why not use them?
Yeah, 100%. So you have resources for people. You have experiences for the leaders that you work with, and describe a little bit of that. So let's say some of this is resonating with people who are listening to this episode, and they're like, "Ooh, this sounds interesting," or maybe I am stuck, or what are things that you offer that that I could access that would be helpful? Even,
Sure.
in addition, again. I haven't even read this, but I know it's going to be awesome. So I always like people reading books because I think it gives a good sense of some of the underpinnings and the foundations of the things that you're doing from a
Mhm.
development standpoint. And everyone has challenges in thinking, well, not everybody, but a lot
Yeah,
about time and money and time
right,
and money together. So
right. Well, I appreciate your mentioning the book. So one of the things that we created, because people always ask me, how do I know what stage of development I'm at? They're very intrigued
yeah.
about that because we don't talk about it a lot out in the common workplace. We talk about other assessments, and the
Yeah.
assessment there's several out there that were created by thought leaders through the years, and the assessment though is a little expensive because of the way that it's coded. And
Mm.
so, there's ways to do that. But what we did was we created a simpler quiz that focuses on the six main stages that we would find people in the workplace.
Okay.
And it's on my website. And for your people, because we're going to have an appearance page specific to your show, all they have to do is go to sharonspano.com/intentional leaders, and
Oh,
they can access, it's called the Leader's Edge, and then they'll get a report, it's all free, that will give them a sense of where they are most of the time, what we call the center of gravity. Because we
yeah.
move up and down in this little ladder of achievement. As I
Yes.
said, we like to talk about, we can grow into higher ways of thinking, but then, something happens, I'm under stress, I have a loss, we can also slip back down. And none of
Right.
that is wrong, but there's usually 2 to 3 areas that we kind of move in and out of. And
Okay.
your primary one is what we call the center of gravity, where you are most of the time. And that's what the assessment will tell you. So that's one thing. And the other thing I would say when you're asking me a bit about the process is what I've done is I've developed a hybrid of all my years of training and experience in corporate America. Excuse me. And so that's a 12-week process called
Yeah.
Potential Unleashed. There's more about that on the website, but it's a one-on-one opportunity to work with me over the 12 weeks. And we meet every week. It's very, very intense work. We're looking at where you are, again, where you may be stuck. We're looking at
Yeah.
it through these developmental lenses. Again, if there's trauma in the background, and that can be anything because trauma, again, is relative. It can be
Yeah.
something as simple as, and believe me, I run into this a lot. My father died at 7, and
Mm.
we never talked about him again. Well, for a
Yeah.
boy, that affects who you are in life. Or my parents got divorced when I was a teenager and we
Yeah.
moved. And then I wasn't able to go to college because there was no money, and so
Yeah.
I became this achiever. So there's all kinds of scenarios. None of them are wrong. They're just part of the human experience. But the beauty is exploring how that is translating into who you are in the here and now.
Yeah, that's so. And can you explain? Because I know, and you said it earlier, and I think a lot of people are becoming more familiar with trauma and the effect of trauma. You said big T, little t. Can you just explain that for people who aren't familiar with that terminology, what that means? Because I think,
Yeah.
again, similar to what you just said, I might have a lot of little T's in my life, but I don't
Mm,
even think of them as trauma. I don't
yeah.
recognize the effect that they have. So just describe
Yeah.
the difference so people can kind of understand that relative to
That's
themselves.
that's a great question because achievers often see even the big T's as little T's because they
Okay.
just move on.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it'll come back to you later. It'll show up in your
yeah,
life, later, if not earlier. So little t might be some of the things, and again, it's relative to the individual, but little t might be some of the things I mentioned, divorce,
yes.
my parents moved, I lost all my friends, but I moved on and I didn't realize the impact of it. Like I have a client right now who is really still dealing with and didn't realize how much it impacted her, that when she was in third grade, one of the kids in school wasn't even her best friend, got hit by a car and was killed.
Oh,
And it's
mhm.
had a dramatic effect on her.
Yeah.
So we're working through that. But then a big T might be
Mhm.
the more obvious. I was a victim of incest. I've had that
Yeah.
with a client, or I was raped, in
Yeah.
college. Those are the ones that we're more familiar with in our society that we know really impact people. And most of the time, if people have had something like that happen, not always, because sometimes even those things we don't ever talk about, but most of the time we know those are serious things we need to go get psychological help for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is a time and a place for that. But I think to acknowledge that if there's something in your background, and what I tell people is, pay attention to your memories,
Mm, okay.
because what comes up in your memories are there for a reason.
Yeah.
Like I remember my parents getting a divorce, but I was so young, it wasn't a big thing. But what I remember more importantly, oddly as it sounds, is my father not showing up at school for a father-daughter dance that
Mm.
I was all dressed for. My grandmother made me this
Mm.
beautiful Valentine, velvet dress, and I picked
Yeah.
the shoes and the whole thing. And my father, who was a functional alcoholic, forgot and never he just didn't show up. So that was a
Yeah.
trauma for me in terms of my
Yeah.
relationship with him, because it really told me you don't matter. You're not seen.
Yeah.
And those are things that I had to work through, later in life. So,
Yeah.
it might sound like a silly memory, but when I realized that memory when I started to write one of my books, I was like, wow, this is still prevalent in my life. Like I need to do
Right.
some work around that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think that I feel strongly that honoring those and being transparent with those memories and recollections and then processing them in a healthy, helpful,
Mhm.
supported way is is vital to us. Again, learning from them and shifting to I don't know, it's not, is it forgiveness? What is it that you would call that experience of looking at that trauma, understanding it, and moving on from it? Or do we move on from it?
Well, here's the thing. Another aspect of my work is grounded in systems, not the typical
Yeah.
systems. We all know the concrete systems, financial systems, whatever, but human systems.
Yes.
So human systems are alive and they tell their own story. And I do something called constellation work, which is a much bigger conversation, but it's a way that we map out the dynamics in the system. So
Mm,
it's very important, to your point, to lay down whatever is in that background with respect
yeah.
to more specifically your parents. Because if
Yeah.
we don't heal that relationship, we're actually part of us, half of us is cut off, numbed, angry. There's all kinds of scenarios that come out of it.
Yeah.
We talk about the four underlying loyalties often in my work because there's principles around human systems that I teach my clients. So when you can see, oh wow, this is, I in my case, as an example, I experienced what felt to me like rejection of a parent.
Yeah.
Therefore, I rejected the parent for
Yes, of
rejecting
course.
me. Yeah. So then that has to be healed. And there's many ways that we do that, but part of that was learning. It's not even because sometimes it's not appropriate to ask somebody to forgive a parent. That in itself can upset the system. And
Yeah.
there's a lot I could be said about that. But let's
Yeah.
say you're a victim of incest. There's no rhyme or reason for you to forgive the parent, but there is an opportunity to at least acknowledge the parent as the father or the mother, as someone important in the system so that you yourself can heal.
Okay.
And that's a very deep and profound work. So there's very specific
Yeah.
ways that we do that in the systemic mapping process or the constellation process to help the individual see what's going on in that relationship, parent or otherwise, so that you can put that down. Because the only way that something new can emerge in a system is if we put to rest that which has been unsettled or disrupted.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh boy.
It's a lot. It's a lot to
It
think about. But that's the joy.
is.
It's the greatest joy of my work
Sharon.
when I can
Yes.
help someone discover that this is still a part of what's holding you back, this
Yeah.
resentment. Like I had a client last year that realized he had anger issues, but they weren't really anger issues for the typical reasons. They were coming from kind of like coming up out of nowhere. Then he realized they were attached to embarrassment because
Oh,
his parents didn't speak English. You know, they were kind of dramatic people that used to embarrass him at school when he was a young
yeah.
kid, and then he'd get angry. And so when we discovered it was really more about embarrassment, then we can talk
Yeah.
about, well, where are you getting embarrassed at work? And then it's
Yeah.
translating into anger. Now he
Yeah.
has a bigger understanding of himself in the context of human dynamics such that he can make more, healthy choices.
Yeah. Oh, Sharon, your work is just fascinating. It fascinates me. Well, and so, so here's where my brain is going. How would someone know? Like, I want to work with Sharon because I think she can help me get unstuck. These things are coming up for me, and I don't know where to turn. How would you characterize the work you do relative to a psychologist or a psychiatrist?
Well, I think there's, as I said, a time and a place for psychologists and
Yeah.
psychiatrists. And I purposely chose not to go into those fields
Yeah.
because in my work, the simplest way to say it is we don't dwell on the past. We
Yeah.
look backwards at that chapter just long enough, again, to make meaning from it so we can move forward.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not saying that there isn't a time, to dwell in it.
Yeah.
Therapy is therapy. But we are learning with more and more research that talk therapy in and of itself, one has the potential to re-traumatize a person, and two
Mm.
can keep them stuck because I go every week and I just talk about my victimization or whatever it
Yes.
is. I mean, I'm
Yes.
I'm a big proponent of therapy and psychotherapy. I just told someone today that they needed to find a psychotherapist for someone in their family, but I don't know that it's always necessary. I think we're a society that, wants to get the medication and the therapy. It's kind of a
Yes.
trend right now. I think of what I do as more about helping people develop to their highest potential. I mean, that's what all of my work is about. And
Yeah.
so what I typically do is people, go on my website, they can schedule a discovery call. We talk first to see what's going on and is it the work a fit for you? And then
Yeah.
if it is, then we start the process of doing the deeper level intake, and then I go back and I develop a customized program. I have the 12 week is a structure, but everything is
Yeah.
customized to the individual. And then we begin from there where we meet every week, and there's a whole process where I'm helping the client really learn to witness themselves in the moment, because
Mm.
most of us have
Yes.
awareness after the fact,
Yeah.
and then we go into guilt and shame about, oh, why did I say that in a meeting, or why did I say that to,
Yeah.
my boss or whatever. The key is to learn to witness yourself in the moment so that you can self-correct in the moment. Then eventually we don't even do those nerdy things
Yeah.
again because we have such heightened awareness. That's where the whole transformation comes in. I'm a different person who no longer gets angry when I'm embarrassed, or who doesn't even get embarrassed over silly things anymore because I
Yeah.
understand that that's a trigger for me and I don't even need to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. The work you do is so profound. And what I've enjoyed learning about you through our couple discussions, and I know I will continue to learn from you, is that you've been on a journey, you've seen pain points, you've seen opportunities, but then you explore it like, hey, what's going on here? What happened? What didn't happen? How do I lay the groundwork to help people reflect on very, very complicated issues that can feel like maybe sometimes out of nowhere they just show up. Like
Yeah,
I'm not happy. I need a
yeah,
new job or I need to change my
yeah,
profession or whatever
yeah,
it might be and they don't realize like, oh, there's a history and there's an
yeah,
exploration of self that needs to
yeah,
happen to
yeah.
move forward to achieve a greater
Right.
purpose and more fulfillment. And you're figuring all that out, which is just I
I
love the
love
work you're
it.
doing.
And thank you
Yeah.
for that summation, because I truly feel privileged to do the work. It's like
Yeah.
nothing was wasted. All the stuff I did in my earlier careers now here. I'm not the most fun at cocktail parties because I'm always watching all the systems in the restaurant and
Right.
what's working and not working. I have to, kind of control myself now. But the I think what I would love everyone in your audience to know is that whatever is going on, again, nothing is wasted, and it's never
Yeah.
too late for you to reinvent yourself.
Yes. Yes.
That's just the beauty of life. I mean, every day counts, every day is a new moment, every day is a new opportunity. And when we train ourselves to see it that way, life is so exciting. And it's not perfect, but it is more robust and meaningful.
Absolutely. I was reading I don't know what book it was, but it was about a gentleman in his 90s, and he was reflecting on his ability to feel his emotions, and he'd been cut off for them for, his whole life,
Mhm.
and decided to explore that and went into that journey of transformation and how it affected his family and his relationship with
Yeah.
his wife and his whole feeling and purpose about his life. And so I agree with you that it doesn't
Yeah.
matter how old you are, it doesn't matter what you're doing, where you're at, that deeper sense of fulfillment and purpose is
Right.
available to all of us. And
Yeah.
are we willing to do the work? And
Right.
my personal opinion is it's really hard to do that work on your own. But
Yes.
having a trusted partner, having someone who can explore it with you, and the qualities that you mentioned earlier around safety and grace and love, and there's no shame in it, is
Yeah.
such an important part of having someone trusting to walk alongside you and that
Yeah.
journey and support you in it. So I just honor
Yes.
so
Thank
much
you
what
for
you're doing.
that's so true. And I would add one more thing, that the world needs us to be our highest self.
Yeah.
There's
Yes.
so much suffering and pain and chaos, and every day it seems to look worse and worse. So the
Yes.
only way that we can make the world better is by each of us being our best self, because then we're
Yeah.
touching all these other lives. I feel that when I work with a leader, and one of the greatest compliments I ever got, Father's Day, one of my clients boxed me and said, "I'm a better father because of your guidance." That means everything to me, because
Yes,
yeah,
of
I want him to
course.
be a great, he's built this huge company, and he's an effective leader, and yeah, we can work on those things and how to help you even be more effective. But if I can help someone be a better parent or a better friend, or a better spouse or significant other, that there's, I mean, you're talking generational shifts
Yes.
there, because I'm
Yes.
very much about, I'm very aware of generational trauma and the impact of that. And
Yeah.
so if we can be, I always tell my clients, you can be the change maker. The
Yes.
world needs you to be the change maker. And
Yeah.
that's just so powerful when you can see that start to happen in a business as well as a family.
Yeah. Oh, what a beautiful story to share too. That email, I'm sure, was it very profound, I'm
Yeah,
sure. Yeah. So, well, and I appreciate and honor what you're doing, as I mentioned, but thank you for taking the
it's
time
all worth
to
that.
be with me today. Really, I've loved getting to know you. I will, of course, be stalking you in the
And
future.
I think we have a lot in common. Yes,
I think we do as well.
yes, yes.
And I've got so many goosebumps this whole time as I'm writing things down that you said that I want to remember and I want to reflect on, not just for the work that I do, but for myself as well.
Yeah,
So thank you for touching my life and allowing me the opportunity to just push a little bit of pause and think about those transformations for me, because then I can show up as my best self, and that's really what my purpose
yeah,
is. So
yeah.
thank
I
you
know
for
you
that.
do. Yes,
Oh.
thank you so much, Cindy. I appreciate you. You're a great interviewer, and you asked really good questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my work with you. It was very special.
I'm honored. Thank you. Wasn't that an interesting discussion? I wrote down so many words as I was trying to take notes and listen to Dr. Sharon. Passionate, motivated by trauma, defining our purpose, people wanting to be seen. We need to look back in order to move forward. All these kinds of aspects of human development. And are you developing? Are you stuck? And do you know? And I think so many of those questions are so important for us to explore for ourselves and as a leader and coach for other people as well. So I hope that this podcast episode prompted you to think a little bit about that for yourself, but also for others that you work with. And when she talks about scarcity versus abundance, are you mindfully and are you consciously aware of what you are choosing? And I think that's something that you can observe for the next week or 2 weeks is when do you operate from a sense of scarcity? Scarcity, that isn't even that hard to say. But and I've been there, right? Like, oh, there's not enough time. Oh, there's not enough money. There's not enough resources. I need to protect what I have versus opening yourself up to abundance and saying there's always enough time. There's always enough resources. There's always enough money to do what I want to do. Or I figure out how to get more, and that's available to me. I love that mindset and the difference between scarcity and abundance because it affects how we live our life and how we operate at work every single day. So lead into that in the next week. Think about your intentionality with scarcity, with purpose, with abundance, and just noodle around, observe other people and things that you see or hear them, and start characterizing that, right? The more that we can observe it, not with judgment, but with understanding and compassion and kindness and interest and curiosity, that can be a great place to be. All right. If you like this episode, please, please, please share it with others. Leave a review, leave a comment, and that's an opportunity for us to get these messages out to more people and create more intentional leaders in the universe. And that's my goal. Until next time, take care of yourself and be intentional.